Once upon a time there was a young girl named Lucy who loved unicorns. She had posters and toys of unicorns all over her room. One night, as Lucy was sleeping, she heard a strange noise coming from outside her window. She looked outside and couldn't believe her eyes. There was a real live unicorn standing in her backyard. The unicorn spoke to Lucy telepathically, saying, "Hello Lucy, my name is Stardust. I've heard you love unicorns, so I wanted to meet you." Lucy was so excited. She ran outside to meet Stardust. The unicorn explained that she had magical powers and could grant wishes. Lucy wished to fly through the sky with Stardust to see the world from above. Stardust agreed and told Lucy to climb onto her back. As they soared through the clouds, Lucy felt like she was in a dream. She could see so far across the countryside, with tiny houses and cars looking like toys. Stardust took Lucy even higher until they were in the outer atmosphere. Lucy couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the round shape of the earth below her. "Are we in space?" she exclaimed. "We sure are," said Stardust. "I want to show you something special." The unicorn then flew them towards the moon. As they got closer, Lucy could make out all of the craters on the moon's surface. Stardust landed and Lucy was able to walk along the dusty ground. She felt like an astronaut. After exploring the moon, Stardust took Lucy on a trip around the solar system to see all of the planets up close. Each one was beautiful in its own way, with colorful gases swirling and meteorites zoomed past. Lucy couldn't believe this was really happening. Their last stop was a quick visit to the International Space Station. The astronauts on board were amazed to see a real unicorn. Stardust let Lucy try out the zero-gravity and float around the station. It was so much fun. After an unforgettable night of space adventures, Stardust brought Lucy back home just before sunrise. "I have to go now, but I'll always remember our magical journey together," said Stardust. Lucy gave the unicorn a big hug before she flew off into the morning sky. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a beautiful princess named Isabella. She had long, flowing golden hair and big blue eyes that sparkled like sapphires. Isabella lived in a huge castle with tall towers that touched the clouds. Every day, Isabella would wake up when the sun crept through her curtains. She would let her lady-in-waiting help her get dressed in an elegant gown. Then Isabella would eat breakfast in the grand dining hall. Her favorite breakfast was freshly baked scones with raspberry jam and cream. After breakfast, Isabella had lessons with her tutors. She studied history, geography, maths, science, literature, music and more. Isabella worked very hard at her studies because one day she would become queen. In the afternoons, Isabella would often go for long horseback rides through the countryside surrounding the castle. She loved the feeling of the wind in her hair as her strong, white stallion galloped along grassy hills and through shady forests. Isabella's favorite place to ride was by a bubbling brook that twisted through a meadow filled with wildflowers. She would let her horse drink from the cool water and rest in the shade of an old oak tree. One sunny afternoon, Isabella decided to venture farther into the forest than she had ever gone before. The path became narrower and the trees grew thicker. Strange birds sang songs she had never heard. Isabella realized she was lost. As the sun started to set, she grew worried. Suddenly, Isabella heard a loud growling noise nearby. She turned to see a pack of gray wolves with sharp teeth and claws snarling at her. Isabella's horse reared up in fright, causing the princess to fall off onto the ground. The wolves moved closer, ready to pounce. Isabella squeezed her eyes shut and braced for their attack. But before the wolves could reach her, a bright flash of light appeared. Isabella opened her eyes and couldn't believe what she saw. A beautiful unicorn with a shimmering white coat and a long, golden horn was standing over her, protecting her from the wolf pack. The wolves whimpered and ran away into the trees. Isabella slowly stood up and approached the unicorn. "You saved me," she said with wonder in her voice. "But how can this be? Unicorns are only make-believe, found in fairy tales." To Isabella's shock, the unicorn spoke. "I am as real as you, Princess Isabella. My name is Starshine and I have been watching over you from afar for many years. Isabella pinched herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. The unicorn chuckled. "This is no dream, dear princess. Unicorns possess magical abilities. We can appear to those who truly need us and have a pure heart. Let me escort you out of the forest before it gets too dark." Still stunned, Isabella climbed onto the unicorn's strong back. Starshine carried her swiftly through the trees until the forest thinned and they were in a familiar path. The sun was just slipping below the horizon as the castle came into view. Isabella slid off Starshine's back. "Thank you for saving me and bringing me home," she said gratefully. "But will I ever see you again?" Starshine leaned down to nuzzle Isabella's cheek with her soft muzzle. "Anytime you need me, just come to the meadow by the brook and call my name." Then the unicorn disappeared in a flash of light. Over the next few weeks, Isabella found her thoughts constantly drifting to the magical encounter with Starshine. She began sneaking away from the castle every day to visit the meadow, hoping the unicorn would appear again. At first, there was no sign of her. But Isabella kept returning faithfully. One afternoon, after Isabella called "Starshine" 3 times, the air shimmered around her. Starshine materialized, more radiant than ever. "Starshine! You came!" Isabella cried joyfully, throwing her arms around the unicorn's neck. From that day on, Isabella and Starshine spent many happy hours together, chatting and playing games. Isabella loved having someone magical to talk to. Starshine told her incredible stories and secrets no human knew. The princess found herself wishing the unicorn could stay with her forever. Isabella knew she couldn't tell anyone about Starshine. They wouldn't believe unicorns were real or understand their friendship. It pained Isabella to sneak around, but she didn't want to lose Starshine. The unicorn seemed to read her thoughts. "Do not worry, dear Isabella. Our destinies are intertwined. We need each other." This gave the princess comfort. But over time, Isabella's tutor and parents grew suspicious about her long disappearances. One afternoon, the king himself followed Isabella to the meadow. He was alarmed to see his daughter talking to a unicorn as if it were real. When Isabella returned to the castle that evening, her father confronted her. "Unicorns are not real," he declared. "They are stuff of fairy tales. I forbid you from visiting that meadow again." Isabella tried explaining about Starshine's magic, but the king refused to understand. From that day on, guards watched Isabella constantly, keeping her from the meadow. Weeks passed without Isabella seeing her friend. She became miserable, missing Starshine terribly. One midnight, Isabella snuck out of the castle. She had to see Starshine again. The guards didn't notice as she slipped past them and ran through the woods to the meadow. "Starshine!" Isabella called desperately. "Please come back. I need you." Suddenly the air glittered and Starshine appeared. Isabella burst into tears as she hugged the unicorn tight. "I'm sorry I left you alone for so long," Starshine murmured. "It's not your fault," Isabella replied. "My father forbids us from being friends. But I don't want to lose you." Starshine gazed at her solemnly. "A true friend is worth any risk. I cannot stay if you must keep me secret." Isabella knew Starshine spoke the truth. She had to find the courage to stand up to her father, for both their sakes. The next morning, Isabella asked her father to speak privately. "I know you think Starshine is not real," she began. "But I've seen Starshine's magic. She is the truest friend I've ever had." The king started to interrupt, but Isabella continued. "Please, father. If you care for me, let me prove unicorns exist. Come meet Starshine." The king was surprised by his daughter's passion. Finally he replied, "Very well. I will meet this Starshine. But if I see no unicorn, you must promise to put such foolishness aside." Isabella readily agreed and led her father to the meadow. She called for Starshine, who appeared in a dazzling flash. The princess and unicorn embraced joyfully. The king stared in shock. "Incredible!" he exclaimed. Slowly, he approached Starshine and bowed. "Princess Isabella was right. Forgive my doubts, noble unicorn." Isabella and Starshine barely contained their excitement. Now they could be friends without any secrecy. From that day on, Starshine lived in the castle, so she and Isabella were never apart. They played games, went on rides, and stayed up late chatting every night. One evening while watching the stars, Isabella said, "I'm glad we're together openly now. Our friendship is stronger than ever." "You were very brave standing up to your father," replied Starshine. "It has deepened the bond between us." Isabella nodded. "I understand now that true friends should never be hidden. Real friendship is the most powerful magic of all." The two friends gazed at the twinkling stars, both thankful they had found each other.